Hot Water History, episode 135, Wednesday night. Richard, what's going on?
We're getting all literary and fiction based, at least for a portion of the episode.
Yeah. A little aside, we don't normally do stuff like this. Used to
I don't think
do,
we've have we ever analyzed a work of fiction?
you used to do movie reviews on the website, right?
True, there are several movie reviews, yeah. However, I can't remember the last time I read a work of fiction all the way through. I take that back. I read Anthony Eslin's The Hundredfold, but that's an epic poem. So I don't even know if that counts as it's certainly a work of fiction, just not a novel. I can't remember the last time I read a supposed classic and a novel as I just completed.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah, I had never read it before. It was never assigned to me in
That's
high
shocking
school.
to me. That's shocking that you survived without. I got it in eighth grade.
You did. Okay. Do you recall any of it? I know that
I
I
do.
oh, you do. Okay. So we're gonna have a nice back and forth here a bit.
Maybe. Maybe more.
Keep fingers
It was
crossed.
in eighth grade.
Yeah. Okay.
What inspired you to read it, I guess?
Well, my daughter is going into ninth grade, so it's her first year of high school, and for summer preparedness in literature, they were assigned to read To Kill a Mockingbird, and I had never read it, so therefore I decided, well, I'll just read it with my daughter and get her take on it and have some discussion before she heads off to her classes to determine what the book's all about, what's salient about it, is there any value in it?
What are your thoughts on summer reading?
I'm not a fan because I always held summer, even as an instructor, but even as a former student, I just say summer's for pleasure reading, it should be, or other pursuits that are more stylized toward your interests and your own particular talents should be developed during the summertime, whereas in school, you're somewhat limited and pigeonholed into different areas. So it, the coercive nature of it too, of read this, this is your free time, even though you're to be spending all of that time with friends and family as well, and go on vacation, have all your summer sports and activities, and then so I never got the impression. I never assigned summer reading. In fact, one time when I was instructing at the high school level, I was asked to, and I said absolutely not. And even as an AP teacher, that shocked a lot of parents and, well, not so much parents, they don't really care, but administrators, because the English department always piled on. One of the prohibitions that I felt about assigning a historical work, even a work of historical fiction, was that the English department just assailed students. You might remember this, having been in a compulsory way made to read all of these things. They just assailed these students with all of these readings over the summer. I'm thinking, well, why am I going to pile on with yet another work? So I just left it to it seems a bit cheap too from my perspective, in that the attention level, or the more so the attention to detail and more heady and elevated analysis and evaluation of a work, is lost if you're just trying to breeze through something over the summer, reading it not for pleasure, but just to check off a box. So that's why I didn't assign it. But I'm glad Lucy's teachers decided to assign her the book so I could read it too. I did take notes.
You took notes chapter by chapter or in the book?
No, I was much more reading it for pleasure, but I do have a list of what I think are central questions that need to be answered within the book, or themes that need to be addressed, or from my perspective, reading it for the first time. And I was tempted, because I tend toward this, being a historian, is to read a critique of them or a review of a work, but I didn't do that because I didn't want my perspective directed any one way or another.
Sure.
So I went into it with a naive, but I think holy innocence about myself, or just approaching it with a type of tabula rasa. Let's just, without looking into it. Obviously, it's not completely blank, the slate by which I approached the book, because I'd heard about what the book's about. I knew a movie was made with it, with Gregory Peck, I think, or Jimmy Stewart. I can't remember who played Atticus Finch in the movie. Excuse me. And then I knew there was a colleague of mine, a teacher who was an English teacher, who her godmother was Harper Lee. So there was a
Interesting.
connection there. Do you want me to give you my evaluation of the book?
I do. I've been waiting.
I didn't really like it. It was meh. There were parts that were very compelling, and I do appreciate that it was set in the South from the perspective of a very precocious but highly intelligent and observant child. I appreciate that perspective, because you do get the untrammeled, unadulterated, direct take. A child's not worried, even as she's writing and recollecting, that is to say, the main character, Scout, the protagonist, recollecting as an adult. That's why the narration is so much more developed and heady. But even her observations, and then her child, the memories that she has as a child of these events that transpire in the novel, they're pretty developed, and I would say elevated for a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old.
Okay. So meh.
Meh.
The it's the
The
one word.
the ending was a big dud for me. I was conflicted at the end. Note, if you haven't read the book, this is going to be full of spoilers, so you can read it and then maybe listen to this episode if you're interested in the commentary. But the ending was meh, not only because it seemed to me, while there's a lot of foreshadowing as to making Boo Radley the secret hero or the tragic hero of sorts within the book, and that he's going to come to the aid of the children, as it was already set forth that he was their protector, kind of beneficent onlooker. I just thought it wasn't a shocking, or, and a la Delingpole, when we talked to him about the quality or lack thereof of American literature, we didn't bring up
I was
Harper
thinking about
Lee.
this.
We didn't bring up Harper Lee, and I would go so far as to say for good reason, because I think he would say what he commented on as a critique generally of American literature, and that is everything has to be big and impressive, and there has to be a grand reveal at the end, as if every story requires it to be a mystery novel that hits you at the end. Its coda has to be what you remember it by. And if that's the case, the ending was meh. I will tell you this too. Every person who I've encountered that says this book is a classic, is wonderful, is one of the best works of American literature, might be even their favorite novel, they're either lawyers who want to be Atticus Finch, or they're professionals who want to live a life akin to his, and he does so out of integrity. But I also found that I didn't like Atticus. I found him to be competent. I found him to be a generally good father, but he's also a quietist. And that I did not like at all. So whereas his son, Jem, reacts with a high level of justice quotient when Tom Robinson is convicted, Atticus is sort of, well, oh hum, I'm sorry. I did my best, and he's stoic about it. He's a quietistic stoic. He he's not emotive, really. He shows his emotion through care of the children, and he acts as this wise onlooker in their development, and he's able to steer people in ways toward the good. So that evokes or speaks of his quality as a human being and his exercise of wisdom. But where's the fire in Atticus Finch? What is, even at the end when the children are attacked by Bob Ewell, the he's just sort of accepts it. His son's arm just got broken by this guy, and he probably would have killed Scout and his son. And he reacts with this type of and the infuriating thing is when and I forget his name now. It was a 4-letter name, the sheriff of the town comes and says, "Oh, Bob Ewell's dead. He was stabbed. He's dead, lying in the field, in the dark field beside the big oak or maple tree or what have you." And it's clear that Boo Radley has come to the aid of the children in their hour of need. First, where's Atticus? He's out. He's at home reading. And then there's this flippant line about how, oh, I tend to read late at night. As if, okay, well, so his intellectual, stoic, quietistic bend, his Irenicism, to use a bigger word, which just means a kind of inert passivism to everything, was really unnerving to me. And it contrasts with his son. And it seems as though Jem, unfortunately, becomes more and more like Atticus as he's maturing and going through the book, whereas you want him to be more emotive and reactionary to injustice. That's what I found admirable about Jem's character. But Atticus is always kind of suppressing that visceral reaction to that emotive reaction to injustice. I found, in other words, if Boo Radley, in many ways, is a vigilante, I like Boo Radley as the reclusive vigilante. He's kind of Batman before Batman. Probably autistic, and Bruce Wayne never stabbed his parent in the leg. But at least as far as I remember from the Batman saga and story. But I much more value Boo Radley, because at least, see, the thing is, for Atticus, for all of his effort and all of his witticisms and all of his very convincing and logical argumentation, he's in many ways just there to mop up the mess. He doesn't prohibit by his actions any of the terrible pain and justice that's going on. Also, it's pretty clear that he detests the palpable racism, and I mean real racism, that is going on in Southern Alabama in the mid 1930s, in the setting and scene and milieu in which the book's written. Because he goes out of his way to argue people should be judged by their character. He does somewhat courageous things in, first of all, representing Tom Robinson, and then when Tom is killed in the prison, under very suspicious circumstances. He goes into the black area outside of town to tell his Tom Robinson's wife exactly what's transpired. So he's doing courageous things, but he doesn't stop any of it. It's so when you're reading a novel too, what I find so kind of grace-filled and advantageous is things will transpire in a serendipitous way, and you might read another thing, and then it'll leave you with an impression that helps you understand the work you're reading concurrent with that. So there was a post, forget who by, but one of the Twitter people that I follow in Catholic Twitter world. I think it's the handle is Pascal. He's good. He's a good theologian, knows his stuff. And there was a quote from Reginald Garrigou-Lagrange, who was this titan in the Dominican order, of the greatest 10 Dominican theologians, especially in the modern era. He would be in the top 5, or at least in the top 10 of all time. That's how brilliant this French Dominican was. And he lived in the late 19th and into the early and first part of the 20th century. He said this quote was pretty interesting. He said, "There's really only 2 reasons to constantly, as an individual, seek and then find solitude and reclusion. One, if you're a criminal and you're hiding from a crime,
Yeah.
or 2, you desire contemplation over action. So you want to be contemplative." And what I found that's Boo Radley. There's a great, there are some good elements to be sure within the book. Like Harper Lee says, when Dill, the little boy who Scout's in love with, and they have this great friendship with her older brother Jem, and they wreak havoc on this small town of Macomb in Alabama, which is very reminiscent of Harper Lee's childhood in Monroeville, where she grew up in southern Alabama. But there's this line in which it hit her when Jem and Dill and she have already gone through all of these risky things, like approaching the Radley household and going through the fence, and they get shot at and all these things. Finally, it dawns on Scout as to why Boo Radley is never seen and why he's shut up in a house. All of their speculations had been that someone is forcing him to stay. Someone's impelling or compelling him to stay. But instead, it dawns on her, no, no, no. Boo Radley's impelling himself to stay. And why is that? Because he's a sensitive soul and he sees all of these injustices, and then he determines that he wants to, in a sense, intercede through his exclusion from society, but then he can't help himself out of charity than to do nice things for the kids or save them when it's necessary. Yeah. And it's funny because, of course, he did commit that crime when he was wild and he stabbed I think it was his father or mother in the leg with scissors or something along those lines when he was a kid. Um, so it, so he was both kind of criminal, but I think the role he plays is vigilante. And I've been wondering, you know how Walter Block, the famous libertarian, well, former libertarian before he espoused the genocide of Gaza by Netanyahu and crew. Well, before he turned utter idiotic Zionist with no real contributions left to make, unfortunately, in libertarian sphere, Walter Block wrote and published a series of books called Defending the Indefensible. And he defends, like, for example, the people you would think are he defends the prostitute. He defends the slumlord is another one. And he has all these different chapters. I don't remember from reading it. It was a long time ago. I didn't read all the books. I read some of the chapters. But was there one for defending the vigilante? Because it seems to me that I don't think this was the intent of Harper Lee, that to kill a mockingbird is can be interpreted, at least I'm interpreting it as a defense of vigilantism. Not that I don't think she wants that. I think she intended to hold up Atticus as the model of how you respond to injustice. But although, yes, Boo's important because he saves the kids at the end. However, they'd be dead without the vigilante. Any thoughts here?
Is To Kill a Mockingbird a psyop?
Well, that's what I'm worried about too. Okay, so let me. That's a.
1960s when it
It
was
seems to.
released.
Okay, in 1960s, 60 America, is it based? I mean, did uh, I don't know. I is it okay when you just as a an American historian, when you encounter a work, whether it's in the visual arts or literature, architecture, obviously a visual art, but along even pieces of music that whenever you have a southerner talking about notice how too it's a book written from the by Harper Lee from the recollections of an adult of her childhood. See? So it's as if Scout becomes the channel of innocent racism. Now, what I mean by that is innocent racism is that she's making these just observations that everyone hates this Negro over here, and there's no justice for that, and that's just how things seem to be. That's what she's observing as a child. And then the adult Scout, writing as the narrator, seems to have this perspective of, well, I was both naive at the time, and now I have greater understanding. And she writes in a very elevated, it's not a somewhat, it's not it's not the English, it's not the diction or syntax of someone who did not go to college, probably in the North somewhere. So is this an embarrassed, and I don't mean this in the Greek sense, apology for the South? Does she have requisite respect for its what I'm going to use an interesting historical word here, peculiar institutions? And by the way, that was what slavery was referred to as by, for example, Jefferson and others of the time in the antebellum period. But remember, peculiar, we use the term peculiar as meaning weird. Like, ooh, he's peculiar. Peculiar simply means of a region. It's not normative. It's an aspect, a characteristic that applies only to a certain area, entity, family, unit, whatever, what have you. So why slavery was called, and rightly so, in the verbiage and usage and syntax of the time, is simply that, look, slavery seems to be a peculiar institution to certain areas of the country, namely the South, but also places like New Jersey or Delaware and some of the middle states. It's peculiar to that area. She seems to talk about the closeness of the community, but how much of that closeness is brought about as a result of everyone agreeing that these are the social norms that we all abide by. And notice how the whole white community, even though they respect the Finches and they like Atticus, he's a very likable character, they all, even his friends, say, "What are you defending that uh Tom Robinson for?" So what are you
I'm going through a rabbit hole in my head and I'm checking some of this stuff on the side. Have you heard of Operation Mockingbird or Project Mockingbird?
Oh yes, the CIA's program to insinuate itself into movies, television media. Walt Disney was active within facilitating Mockingbird. It's through Mockingbird that the CIA implanted conspiracy theory as a pejorative.
I don't know why was it called that? I don't know. I'm
Well,
not I'm
well,
not
remember what they say about why the book's called to Kill a Mockingbird. When when Jem and Scout get their BB guns for Christmas from Uncle Jack, it's both Calpurnia and Atticus that say, I well, Atticus won't even teach the kids how to shoot, even though we find out later he's a dead shot. And he was called when he was a child One Shot Finch because he was such a good marksman. But he won't tell
why won't he teach him how to shoot?
that again, it goes back to his character. It's he
This is such a psyop. This book's a psyop.
You think so?
This book's a
It's
psyop.
you think it's anti-Second Amendment or is it
I,
anti-self-defense? That bothered me about the book. He
I think you should read a critique of. I think you need to read a critique. I don't remember enough of the details of the book
uh
to remember, but just hearing it back from the lens that I have now, I don't trust any books that are
no.
that are forced reading 60 years after they're released. And they're
I get
still going.
and here's what corrupts it a bit. It's every as I mentioned or alluded to before, your professional normie loves this book, which means it's already my antenna are sense my psy-op antenna are up.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's the 1960. This book came out in 1960s. You have the lawyer, and then you have the vigilante that you're talking about, and the lawyer doesn't win.
Correct.
It just feels like a big. It feels like the 1960 version of white guilt.
Yes. Well, okay. So here's another problem along those lines. Yes. Okay. Very good. Along those lines, too, there's a point a la John Hasness where Scout and Jem press Atticus about the legitimacy of law. And they say Jem is beside himself about what has transpired when Tom Robinson is found guilty by this jury of all white men. It's either before the verdict comes down or just after it. But Atticus has this weird self-contradictory speech that I just hated. So he says something along the lines of, I should have written it down, but I didn't. He says, look, there's only one area of our life, let's say American life, where everyone's equal, and it's before a court. Yes. But then, so then I can't remember if it's Jem or Scout presses him further. He goes, but what happened with the verdict? So it must have been after. And this is, forgive me if this is not verbatim from the book. This is how I'm recollecting it. This should be pretty accurate though, because I only read it over the course of a week. And then Atticus says, well, there was no way that they were gonna find him innocent. It's just how men work. So, and then Jem goes and says, well, this is stupid. Why do we have, if you proved that he was innocent beyond any doubt, reasonable, unreasonable, what have you. And so he says, why don't we should just have judge juries or a judge determination, bench rulings. This idea that we should have a jury of our peers determine the guilt or innocence of someone, particularly pertaining to such a horrific crime and then sentence or non-crime, which should have been an acquittal and a non-sentence, but then turns into a capital offense and near capital sentence. We don't know if that would have transpired, but it ended up being capital anyway. But how can you hold those two things together? It's like, well, the court is non-biased, but it's made up of the same people or individuals. So there's an elitism about this. Judge Taylor is better than the jurors. Judge Taylor is more judicious. He's more equitable than ultimately the races meant, even though one held out, the Cunningham guy held out just to make, in a way, almost to make it look good, like they had really deliberated over what was an inevitable verdict of guilty for a colored man who was convicted of rape in the South, or was brought to trial of rape of a white woman in the South, no matter how dubious the claim was. But you can't hold those two. You can't say, well, the court is we're equal before the law, as he, maybe that's wishful thinking, but it doesn't sound like it. It seems as though he's adamant and voicing something genuine or authentic, to at least in his own belief system. And then to say that, well, no jury in the South, no jury around here would ever have acquitted him. Well, then you're not being treated as equal. There's no equality before the law. Those two things don't hold. So his poor son is left to kind of scratch his head and say, well, is injustice just the norm? And are we to sit by and go, ho hum, I gave it my best try. I cross-examined, or I put forth a great case. I made Mr. Ewell write with his left hand to prove that he's left-handed. And Tom Robinson's right-handed, so that means that the girl must not have been punched by Tom Robinson. So it's like, well, okay, that's even then it was kind of from my perspective, it's like a childish defense. But it fails. And then Atticus doesn't go and do some sort of penance, or nor is he weighing the consequences of his loss. It's just like, whoa, okay, I gave it a shot. Tom Robinson's off to the state penitentiary where he's going to get shot as he tries to escape. By the way, I forgot to reference why the Mockingbird, why it's called, why you don't shoot a Mockingbird. Because when Scout and Jem get their BB guns, he says, look, I can't stop you from going out and trying to shoot at squirrels or birds, but don't kill a mockingbird. And he and Calpurnia, the sort of home servant, says, well, you don't kill a mockingbird. I think it's both of them, because they have such a beautiful song, right? They're just there to elevate our consciousness of goodness through their song. What are your thoughts? I'm kind of rambling on.
Yeah, I didn't remember that part about the
Yeah.
Mockingbird.
Yeah. So that's why it's called the Kill a Mockingbird. And it's referenced again toward the end. So who's the Mockingbird in the personification of the Mockingbird? Is it Boo Radley? Yeah, okay. Is it Atticus singing his song in the tree, but all he's there for is just to look at and admire, but doesn't affect anything and can be comfortable with that? I mean, he's just not an emotive. And maybe as a person who's extroverted and tends toward emotive expression, that's he and I would not get along, or I don't see that we wouldn't mesh because of his quietism.
Right.
I mean, for example, there's times where he shows a warmth and affection to the kids, but it's almost it strikes me, or as I was reading the book, it was impressed upon me that it's almost pro forma. You know, he says, "Oh, Scout, come on up on my lap, and we're gonna read." And there's a warmth and affection as he holds her, but Harper Lee doesn't describe it, and perhaps it's just Southern culture where the father didn't show emotive affection. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, I would expect that in New England culture, where there's warmth expressed through logical deduction or a wink and a nod that I appreciate and understand that you're my daughter or son or something. That's like an Irish hug. Good job, son. That sort of thing. The Southern culture doesn't strike me as having that restriction or governor on fi filial and familial notions or affect. I mean, we could go on forever, but there were a couple huge things that I mean, one of the questions that I had that I want to develop with who's ever read it is Atticus a hero, a villain, a quietist? Is he too principled for his own good? Or better, he's principled for his own good, but does that necessarily translate into, is he principled for everyone else's, too principled for everyone else's good? To the point where at the end, like in the shocking end scene, supposedly shocking, but you could see it coming from a mile away. In the shocking end scene, he's not, I mean, his son's had his arm almost ripped out of the socket and broken. His daughter's been essentially stabbed. Luckily, it didn't hit her because she's in a ham costume. Okay. But he's almost had his two children murdered. And then again, the sheriff comes over. Heck, I think his name is Heck. And he's like, oh, he's in a field. We're alluding to this, but we're not alluding to this. He's dead. And Atticus's first inclination is, well, we have to publicize this and bring this to court. And whoever did this, it could be Jem. Oh my God, you know, Jem will have to testify. It's like, what father having his kids just endangered says, well, we got to really take this to court and adjudicate this. Are you out of your mind? That just anyway. I I had a lot of problems with the
I think
book.
this book's just, yeah, I think the wheels are turning. The conspiracies are just, what's he a caricature of?
He's a the first thing that pops in my mind is we have all these discussions today, especially among people who really observe with a level of astuteness the whole mindset and psychology of progressives. They love holding up intent as the defining criterion for whether an act is good or bad and whether a person is good or bad or not. So a case in point would be regarding climate change. Yeah, all the science could tell us we're out of our mind and contradict us, that there are more polar bears than ever, or that in the 1970s there were timepieces written and covers about global cooling. And Paul Ehrlich get up and talk about scarcity of resources, and none of it comes to fruition. And then they just shrug their shoulders even in the face of claims of hypocrisy. And they shrug their shoulders because it doesn't matter the facts and reality on the ground. Their intent is good. And so, therefore, in Catholic moral theology and classical, even Aristotelian ethics, you judge the moral or immoral character of an act, and over time and by habituation, the moral agent, using three criteria, namely the intent, yes, of the actor, the circumstances in which the act took place or was exercised, and then the effect, the outcome. You see? So progressives love to just look at intent. It's very easy. Well, sure. I mean, I didn't intend to, through the inception or support of a national bank, impoverish entire swaths of the world's population. But my intent was rather to for or preclude any further what we might call um, unjust panics that had transpired in the 19th century and smooth out the boom and bust cycle. That was our intent, so therefore it's justified. To be who cares? I mean, it's patently out of our control whether Keynes comes around and then says we need monetary policy to facilitate constant state expansion. Who could have seen that? It wasn't my intent that that happened.
So who do you think he's a caricature of?
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying. Sorry.
The middle of the
Thank you for
road,
drawing me back.
the middle of
He's
the
just a
road.
caricature of a progressive. That's why they love it. They love Atticus Finch. He's the intellectual. His intent is all that matters. He doesn't have any burden of guilt. He's guiltless, but he's exonerating himself.
Oh, I think that's it. Right. And then it also stokes the outrage on the other side that it's still not enough.
Precisely. Yes, there's nothing. In other words, yes, when you just say intent is the demarcation line for whether something's good or bad, even if so the outcome doesn't matter. In fact, the outcome's never really achieved, so we have to constantly perpetuate our own sense of justice by continuing on in this work, whatever it's going. Can you hold on 1 second?
Yeah. Wow. I think we're getting somewhere on this though. It reminds me of it's important that we have the conversation. That's what it feels like with Atticus Finch. I haven't read that book since 8th grade. It's bringing back some good memories. I remember watching the movie too. I think the movie's pretty good. Atticus Finch. Now I'm just thinking about every book that I've ever read growing up and what the subliminal signs were. Richard and I we got some messed up brains now. Shout out to everyone who hasn't read the book but is still listening to this. We've gotten pretty deep into the weeds. We actually had something else to talk about, but I think we're probably just gonna skip that and go to Meanwhile in Oak Park, most likely.
So I'm back. Things going wild upstairs. So my my basic answer to your question, fundamental answer response to your question is I think one of the things that irritated me about him is that again, his stoic quietism is held up as an example by which to live. but it struck me more just as cowardice. And as such, he's this caricature of the progressive who, as I said, oh, my Greta Thunberg's intent is to save the planet. It doesn't matter whether her actual advocacy is tainted by, a cabal of people who are and corporations who are vested in alternative energy, or it's funded by the Soros fund, or so it doesn't matter the orange. This is why, by the way, when it's so difficult, it's sort of like nailing Jello, to hit back at leftist, especially neoliberals, because when you attack their integrity, their definition of integrity is different. It's essentially different than what other people, particularly people on the right, but even sort of independent thinkers and those operative within the paradigm of Western civilization, that virtue is a strength of habitual good works and vice is the opposite. And all of those figures, all those components that I spoke of as weighing into determination of the morality of an act are classical, and they're classic because they make sense and they're effective. To a progressive, not only is that system old and outdated and anachronistic, but you're the judgmental one for saying that, well, Greta's a bad person because the origin of her advocacy is fruit of a poison tree. Her actual, if her positions were to come about, they'd be counterproductive to the welfare and the just the ecosystem or environment. And that it's a watermelon, to use a Delling poll, that her advocacy is green on the outside but red and socialistic as such on the inside. That doesn't matter to them. She's good because of her intent, purely her intent.
I love it. Any other notes before we can get to people's segment?
There were, I will say that I was at times, it tickled just a couple final notes. It did tickle my libertarian funny bone or what have you, or sensibilities, when Scout goes through school earlier in the book and the teachers are so poor. And I don't mean poor because the teachers are of a higher class than the individuals there in Southern Alabama, in this generally rural community they're educating. But Scout's teacher says, stop reading. She commands her to stop reading because Atticus has taught her to read in a method that is not the teacher's. So, and what they're learning in public school is of little to no value. So that was good. But then, so there were some libertarian elements. But then there's this nod to national centralization too, to the point in which I thought she was being critical, Harper Lee was, through telling of the situation of the Yules, how the Yules were dependent upon government largesse, that Yule had essentially become a perpetual welfare recipient, the Yule family, and this did nothing. Getting checks from the aid agency and federal welfare did nothing to change his sensibilities toward Black people, toward others, to care of his children, stopping being a drunkard and the like, right? But then she has this vignette in which she talks about how Bob Ewell, the real antagonist and villain in the book, he was the shortest employee in WPA history. That's Work Progress Administration history, because it's set during the Depression. And to her mind, and this is Scout relaying, and it seems to be Harper Lee's thought, is that he was the only employee of the WPA to be fired because of sheer laziness. So the natural conclusion, someone of our persuasion and political and ideological position would be like, well, the WPA is a boondoggle. It's not really helping anyone. And if this guy, and by the way, if the laziest person on the face of the planet, and certainly in the country at the time, Bob Ewell, is finally forced out, how many people who are just not doing very much work at all are getting WPA checks? So that was interesting. But then that all that good libertarian sentiment and good maybe anarcho-capitalist or at least anarchist sentiment, decentralized sentiment, is eviscerated and nullified when she says, Scout at one point asks, there was an event where like the WPA had disbanded in Macomb, and Scout says, well, what happened to the WPA? And Atticus's response is 12 old men got rid of it. Not 12 old men, 9 old men got rid of it. Sorry, that was a reference to the FDR court packing. If FDR had his way, it would have been 12. But the nine old men got rid of it. Now, what is that the response of someone who has a more universal and informed and critical worldview about what's transpiring around him? Not really. It's just this flippant insult that, oh, the WPA was a good thing and 9 old men got rid of it. I mean, I don't think that I couldn't imagine myself saying that. Even okay, let me just turn the tables. As a father myself, and if my 8-year-old said, what happened to, I don't know, name what happened to Social Security? Let's say at a Dreamland. Yeah. Social Security got ramped up. Or Medicaid, or Kamala gets in and gets her wish that there's going to be Medicare for all or Medicaid for all. Yeah. And my 8-year-old son comes up to me and says, hey, Dad, what happened? Why is it that the Medicare, why is the healthcare system terrible and everyone's got this Medicare for all? I wouldn't flippantly say, well, because Kamala's a communist. That's not a charitable response. That's not informative. And he waves her away without a lot of explanation. psy-op?
I say, yeah.
Okay. I'm leaning toward that. The more I hear all of these establishment voices that this is a great. By the way, did you know that Harper Lee did not write another novel until the very end of her life?
Yeah.
And by the way, it wasn't another novel. It was just it was a kind of prequel to Kill a Mockingbird. So how did this woman
I'm
get
not saying
elevated
I'm not saying necessarily that she's
a bad writer?
a government writer. I just think this was
No, I don't know.
artificially
Maybe
right.
she's a Mason.
I just think there's some artificially propping up for more nefarious reasons here.
Mm-hmm. Mm. And if there's the general theme is that, look, as long as the peculiar institution of de jure segregation continues on unabated by some outside force. Remember, this is just 6 years as she's writing after Brown versus the Board of Education. So in other words, is this a commentary, an elaborate, fictitious, but nonetheless effective propagandic piece by which nothing's changed, right? Although the book is in 1935, set in 1935, middle of the Depression. It's that she wrote it in 1960. You could just simply transfer or push down or nudge the time span and say nothing's changing here. no matter how convincing, as long as things remain provincial, as long as things remain decentralized, these injustices, the worst of which are the treatment of Calpurnia, the conviction of Tom Robinson, none of this is going to change without some outside benevolent force. Is that Washington? I don't know. It seems to me that Atticus is warming up to that. Is it the governor in Montgomery who's going to come to the rescue? No, it's not, because the governor in Montgomery is not coming to the rescue, and Tom Robinson's dead anyway. Would this have happened if instead there was more oversight or restriction on this type of, I'll call it peculiar, provincial, regional behavior?
Hmm.
But to me, the biggest strain or biggest theme is throughout the book is what is to be preferred, civilization and law, although it seems to me that it's a fantasy and one that nonetheless Atticus Finch holds on to as the only institution by which one gains equality, or traditional vigilantism. What is to be preferred here? And it just hit me now. Maybe the end of the book is about how she's saying it's got to be, in order for justice to be met out, it's got to be something of a mixture of both, although it would be preferred that it's civilization and law. The vigilante has a role. I'll apologize myself for those who have not read the book. I know you did
Right.
earlier.
I'm leaning psy-op.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about a town
That I wish was a psyop.
that I think a lot of people have probably read this book? I would say.
Oh, oh, for sure. For sure.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Should we go to your gay suburb now?
The people segment. Meanwhile, Oak Park. Two quick ones. Village Hall to close early on August Fridays. The included dates are August 16th, August 23rd, and August 30th.
I'm going to make a forecast here, as if I'm a novelist, that although the village hall is going to be closing on those Friday dates, every village worker is going to get full pay.
Village Hall, located at 123 Madison Street, will close early for the rest of the Fridays in August. The change is part of a pilot program, according to village officials. Included dates are August 16th, 23rd, and August 30th. On those days, Village Hall will only be open from 9 a.m. to noon. In-person business can still be conducted in the morning on those dates. The availability of services like police and fire will not change. Village officials also state that many other services can be accessed online and do not require a visit to Village Hall, such as filing for licenses and permits. One of the village trustees made a recommendation for this initiative, which was supported by the rest of the village board and by village manager Kevin Jackson, according to Chief Communications Officer Dan Yapchik. The program is intended to recognize staff's work throughout the year and allow for flexibility at the end of the summer. Yapchik told Wednesday Journal, summer hours allow for maintaining work-life balance while still ensuring productivity, he said. According to Forbes, summer Fridays began in the 1960s. At this time, New York advertising agencies tried to prevent employees from being less productive during the summer by letting them leave early on Fridays. The popularity of summer Fridays increased again during the COVID-19 pandemic, according to Forbes.
If Donald Draper can do it, then so can Dan Yapchik.
At the end of Oak Park's program, the initiative will be evaluated and could be continued in the future.
Well, are they not admitting of something that's quite or should be quite dangerous to their status? In that if they don't need to be there on the latter half of Fridays over the summer, then what do they need to be there for
Let's just keep rolling it
the
back.
rest of the days? Just keep, yes,
An hour a week. Just take one
Yeah.
off
until we're done.
till we got none left.
And then everybody looks around and says, well, it seems as though I'm not getting fined as much or taxed, and I'm able to skirt this parking ticket. So maybe, yeah, I think we could do without these people.
Things are going great.
Things, yeah, things are going great, and it'll only get better.
D97 starts year with new support for sixth graders. It also debuts expectations for middle schoolers, such as locking cell phones away. Oak Park Elementary School District 97 is preparing incoming sixth graders for the new school year and possible back to school jitters through its new District 97 Middle School Connection program. Rising sixth graders at both Brooks and Julian Middle School had the opportunity to participate in the 3-day program from Tuesday, August 13th through Thursday, August 15th from 9 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. While participation was not mandatory, the program was highly encouraged.
Summer reading.
According to Amanda Siegfried, Senior Director of Communications and Engagement for D97, about 79% of incoming students signed up for the program.
Oh, Amanda Siegfried is the Deputy of Communications? Senior Director. Whoa. Isn't she a really hot actress? She played Elizabeth Holmes in that one series.
I don't know.
She was in Mean Girls, I think. Come on, Charlie. Yep.
The goal is to foster a sense of belonging and community, to provide opportunities for students to develop social and emotional skills, and to give students strategies to support their success while addressing anxieties or concerns they might have. The program was developed by D97's middle school leadership team as a response to requests raised by students and families for more support from the district in the transition from elementary school to middle school. Okay, we got to do this afterwards. The transition involves not only a change in buildings, but it comes at a critical point in students' developmental growth, district officials said via email to Wednesday Journal. These changes can impact students' academic performance, social experiences, and overall sense of self. These changes, both academically and developmentally, are significant, district officials said, adding that middle schoolers can report feeling a drop in their sense of belonging during this transition. According to Luis Fernando de Leon, Assistant Superintendent of Middle Schools, the success of the program will, quote, come down to the experience of the students. De Leon said part of the design was to have students leave feeling welcomed and comfortable navigating their new school and structure. Quote, we also want them to walk away with at least a couple of new friends and adults in the building that they know by name and can trust, De Leon said. The same applies to middle school teachers because it is also an opportunity for them to connect with new students. Quote, we believe these connections and knowledge will help students to feel more confident and ready to succeed at Julian's or Brooks on day one, he said. Students attending will explore their schedules, meet teachers, and participate in education activities, including a getting to know you escape room, where they will, quote, get to know friends through fun problem-solving challenges.
And the reward is they actually escape the school.
Quote,
Can you imagine how motivated you would be?
That would
If
be
like, if you
awesome.
solve it, you get to run home. Oh, let's get to work, guys.
Quote, we plan to evaluate the program through feedback and surveys to ensure continuous improvement so we can make it even better each year, district officials said via email to Wednesday Journal on August 9th. In preparation for the new...
Wait, can I pause? That would be, I'm just envisioning the one kid that's just actually paying attention but hates school at the wrong moment for the teacher. And they say, okay, we're going to have an escape room. And he just bolts out the door. Jimmy!
In
Oh my
preparation...
God, he's running in the street. I won!
In preparation for the new school year, D97's middle school team worked on aligning behavior expectations between Julian and Brooks Middle School. The school-wide behavior expectations focuses on 5 key areas: cell phones, lockers, backpacks, IDs, hallways and bathrooms, lunch and social time. I don't feel like reading the rest of this because this
No,
is
because it's
super
boring as all. But again, just another bit of, well, further proof that what was not mentioned in any of those pieces, the actual education of the children.
I don't know. I'm gonna give him a break on that one. School's
Why?
not started. It's not like a first day of school thing.
Well, why is this the cell phone policy and policing and
Oh,
discipline? All these,
that's for later in the year.
but that's my point. Wouldn't it be more interesting if they had invited, I don't know, Harper Lee's daughter to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird or something like that?
No,
It wouldn't.
you think that would be more interesting than
Yeah, at
getting
least
to
it's about
know
their
you
education.
getting to know you escape room? No, this is like because these kids they come from different grade schools at Oak Park, so
Oh, so it's just about
kind of a
orientation.
yeah, basically it's like middle school orientation.
What are we looking at now?
The open jobs at
Oh,
Oak Park, the village of Oak Park.
oh man.
Police officer, firefighter, paramedic, or paramedic, paramedic.
Pandemic. You put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yeah. Urban planner, building inspector, community service officer, chief financial officer. Wow, they don't have a chief financial officer. Get rich out in the game. Get rich out in the game.
Yeah, I could imagine.
Base salary of 175K.
Oh, that's pretty good. Of course, I'd be committing suicide within a month, so I don't know.
Executive coordinator, whatever that means.
Yeah. Ooh, what's their salary? Oh, it's by hour.
They're waged.
Ugh. $39 too much.
Let's see. Anything else that catches your eye? Parking enforcement officer. You couldn't
Ooh.
pay me $1 million a year. You couldn't pay me $1 million a year.
Well, you get second half of Fridays off in the summer.
You could not pay me $1 million a year. $21 an hour. You couldn't pay me $1 million a year.
I love how after the $21 it says grade 4, which has a double entendre to be sure.
Deadline for application until position is filled. 37.5 hours a week.
Imagine devoting your life to that. Would you?
Wouldn't do it for $1 million a year.
Wow. I think I would.
I wouldn't.
Because, well, you know what I would do though?
A year of giving unless you're just going to infiltrate and
could I not simply direct, like I would not give one parking ticket to anyone who had a village sticker or an auto sticker outside of Oak Park. It would be only Oak Park people.
I wouldn't. I could never do that.
Oh, this guy's from Berwyn? He's fine.
I think a good question to ask someone is, what job could you never do when you want to get to know them? What's a job what's a job you could never do? And mine is that.
Parking ticket.
I said that. I asked that, and then I was in a group before and I asked that just to break the ice with some people. And then I said, the person that tickets people on parking. I could never be that guy.
That's a rough one.
Anyways,
yeah,
that's
there it is.
The people segment.
Amen.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, no, I'm gay? Meanwhile, Oak Park.
Yep.
Drink trading, brewing.
We
I
had
really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the Spark Notes on To Kill a Mockingbird.
they're dark notes
Yeah.
instead of spark notes. Yeah. Drop the black pill on To Kill a Mockingbird.
That's a good. That might be a thing.
We might have to have
Dark Notes.
set aside one episode, maybe a month or every other month, just to
We'll just start a book club. The podcast will be a book club.
yes. Although it's funny, my son had to read Great Expectations.
I have never read that.
Or have you read any Dickens?
Ah,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Oliver Twist, nothing like that.
Not ringing bells.
Well, I'll tell you what,
Christmas Carol.
I'm convinced you never read A Tale of Two Cities? You probably read A Tale
I
of Two
did
Cities.
read A Tale of Two Cities.
So Dickens, I've read, was it, I forget who it was. Wasn't Paul Gottfried. Maybe it was David Gordon at the Mises Institute. He has one of the two guys has just a visceral hatred for Dickens. In other words, he's the version of Upton Sinclair just in England. And he's a lot wordier because he was paid by the word. So yeah. There you go.
Have
What
you
do
read Lord of the Flies?
Yes.
That's a book.
Golding.
That's a book I actually liked.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that one.
It's okay. It's okay. I should note that I do like, and I have read novels that I enjoyed. It's not just all nonfiction, but this was a nice retreat, if you will, from reading all
What's your
nonfiction.
favorite novel?
I like For Whom the Bell Tolls. Oh no, I'm sorry. Farewell to Arms. And as much as Dalrymple would say, "Oh, Hemingway's shit, you know that. He's a psy-op himself. Catch him. He dies in Ketchum. You know what Ketchum is if you spelled it out in the satanic calendar? 666." But did you not enjoy that? I did.
I did. It's getting really good, actually.
Oh, thanks. No, but I really liked Farewell to Arms, but I haven't read it in a long time. I mean, let me think. What's wild is I remember reading when I was about in 8th or 9th grade a Western novel that's kind of considered I used to love Jack London when I was a kid. White Fang, Call of the Wild. But then Jack London was an absolute commie. So I had to kind of retract on that. But there was another book. I mean, I probably couldn't. Nothing's coming to mind other than Hemingway. Sound and the Fury I thought sucked. I don't like Faulkner. Yeah, nothing's really popping. Oh, I liked some French novels from French writers, and I like Crime and Punishment. How could I leave Crime and Punishment out? Have you ever read Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky? Or War and Peace? Anything by Tolstoy?
Isn't War and
Anna
Peace like
Karenina?
way too many
What's that?
pages long?
Hmm?
Isn't War and Peace like way too many pages
Yeah, it's
long?
about 1,200 pages.
I think I read the Charlie Brown comic book where he's joking about having to read War and Peace or something.
Lucy as Napoleon. Yeah.
I don't know what cartoon that was from.
Yeah, it's so funny because I haven't been in a literature class for so long. I like some Twain. I like Huckleberry Finn. So anyway, maybe more. We'll have to sit down and think
Dark
about
Notes. I like Dark Notes.
Dark Notes. Dark Notes with Gary and Charlie.
That's a good one.
All right. Well, maybe we'll make it a regular segment or an episode on a rotation. In the
All right.
meantime, let's
Yeah.
buy Trinitine Brewing stuff. Trevor and the Elcords need our support.
I'm
Are
getting thirsty.
getting very thirsty. It's dry out here, ironically, in August in Chicago. Need something to wet the whistle.
Yeah.
And let's continue. Several intentions to pray for. Do please keep in your prayers Mrs. James Dellingpole. James' wife is ailing and needs our intercessions, petitions. I fasted a little bit in her honor to dedicate some rosaries for her recovery. So God's will be done in that regard. Also, you just, if you have that time, especially if you're Catholic, investigate Eucharistic adoration, Christ's presence and direct blessing there for you, right in that monstrance, to see, lay your physical eyes and your vision upon Totus Christus, God himself, right there. It's an amazing thing if you can engage in contemplation right before the Lord and lay before him your worries, anxieties, and watch them vanish in light of his glory, and be reconstituted and ready to be non-Atticus Finch like and be more Boo Radley in the light of the Holy Eucharist. I think that's a wrap, Charlie. How you feeling?
Feel great.
Awesome.
Appreciate
been
everyone,
great.
especially everyone that stuck it to the end. Take
Yeah.
care.
All right. Bye.